Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I guess it really depends on what time you're listening to this. My name is Garrett J. Lawrence, and welcome to another episode of People Watching. We've got a really good show ahead of us today. Plenty of things to talk about. I've been writing a lot on some things that have happened this week and what my thoughts are. Not a whole lot of things coming from the White House. Just a couple of few controversies and just things happening in the news cycle that piqued my interest, and they might pique your interest. So, with that being said, it's the wrap up of finals for a whole lot of people, myself included. I finally finished strong. I finished strong, and I'm looking forward for these next couple of weeks of not having any homework. Still working, but not really having anything to come home to afterward. I'm really excited about that. I can dedicate some more time to the show. I can find some more time to research, to read. That's kind of the big thing for me right now, just making sure I spend this time wisely. So, yeah, super exciting. I hope finals went well for all my other college-aged friends. I'm sure you're excited to be driving home finally. Who knows, maybe you're listening to this while you drive home. Drive safe, please. But yeah, that being said, got a lot to talk about, a lot of fun things to talk about. I wrote a lot. I did a lot of research. The big thing this week was Piers Morgan had Nick Fuentes on his show pretty early on. It's left a lot of criticisms of both Piers Morgan and Nick Fuentes. Overall, it was kind of a colossal failure for Piers. He really was constantly striving for these really bizarre, gotcha moments. And what he found is that Nick Fuentes is somebody who believes very passionately in his morals and his worldview, unlike Piers Morgan, who seems like somebody who is compromised a little bit and has fallen into being kind of a closeted liberal. He slammed Fuentes over his celibacy. He slammed Fuentes over some of his statements. Piers Morgan apparently doesn't understand how per capita works, which was really funny to watch. It was really hilarious interactions between the two of them. I'm hoping that we don't see Piers continue to act this way as much going forward. Following up to his interview with Nick Fuentes, he had Steven Crowder on the show, where Steven Crowder last week, I believe, had Fuentes on his show. They had some questions for him, and so there was some really funny interactions between them two. First, Piers basically said that Crowder went light in his interview. Crowder obviously responded like, did you even watch the interview? Did you watch it at all? He's said X, Y, or Z before on his own show, but he's, elaborated more on my show. Piers just plays a clip of Fuentes on Steven's show. Again, we come back to Piers and we come back to Steven, and Steven again asks the question, did you watch the show? And his response is no, which I think is hilarious, and it's honestly goes to show how a lot of people think right now and how a lot of people get their information or read or, everything is clipped. Everything is clipped nowadays, and everything gets taken out of context. Everything is clipped, everything's taken out of context, and it's really unfortunate to watch. I think that's why a lot of people didn't like Charlie Kirk. They were just handed weird clips that were super out of context, and then they went along with their beliefs. But I'm rocking a new outfit today. It's inspired by Will Byers' outfit in episode 4 of Stranger Things. Got the thermal and the flannel underneath. Jean jacket is not part of his outfit on the show, but I just thought, the two went together. So I'm excited. I've got some good plans for Christmas. I don't know about you guys. I'm stoked to go home. Anyway, I'm a little off topic, but the big thing, the big talk on the show on Piers Morgan and with Fuentes, the big thing, and a lot of people are still talking about it, is the per capita issue. Fuentes obviously talks about, acts of violence between whites per capita and blacks per capita. Piers apparently does not understand what that means. A simple search or going to the NIH or the FBI, you can find out what that means. It's not really a foreign term or piece of, examination. So I did that part for him. I did that part for a lot of other people. So I wanted to look at some of the statistics that Fuentes often references and Piers didn't seem to agree with or understand. Again, Piers has got a whole research crew working behind him just to get gotcha moments, and still none of it was successful because now some people like myself have gone and looked at the statistics ourselves, per capita specifically, per 100,000, and seen the truth. And the truth is kind of ugly, but it doesn't mean we need to hate anybody. It doesn't mean we need to profile anybody, but it just is for your own awareness. And so to get into that, per capita is just a way of measuring a certain crime or statistic per 100,000. It's much more effective at establishing, the general, what the general stats are, or percentage or probability within a group can be. And so I went to the FBI and I went to the NIH, and the FBI hasn't updated many of their per capita stats for like modern day numbers. I'm sure they've changed, but probably not as much. Maybe skewing in one direction more than the other. So for the first stat I would like to talk about, and I'm probably going to have people come for my throat. Probably going to have a lot of people say that, I'm a racist. I'm racially profiling people. I'm not. I'm simply just telling you what the data is. Simply just telling you what the statistic is. Now, obviously, some statistics can be wrong. This one is hard to fake. In fact, these numbers, what I'm about to read to you, are including all of the racial misclassifications that we've had for the last 30 years, and they still skew this way. So, according to the FBI, their per capita stats from 1991 to 2001, the non-white to white robbery arrest ratio was 5.773. And what that means is it means that for every white person arrested for robbery, almost 6 non-white people were arrested for the same crime. Again, that's the FBI. The FBI. The NIH in 2019 gave us some homicide numbers. White people accounted for 41.1% of homicide offenders. So you have homicide offenders, and they represent 41.1% of them, okay? And this is in cases where the race was known. We have a lot of cases where this isn't known, and due to gang violence, there's no way to quantify the race of a lot of offenders. And that's just one example, is gang violence. Their per capita offending rate for Black Americans was reported to be roughly 8 times higher than that of white Americans for homicide. So, not that Black Americans are going to be 8 times more likely to commit a crime, but it's just that the offender of a homicide is 8 times more likely to be Black. That's what that means. Not that there's a higher probability of a Black African American committing homicide. It's just that the offender has 8 times more the chances of being Black. Nothing wrong with that. Now, white people are just typically underrepresented among these arrests for violent crimes, especially when compared to Black and Hispanic populations. And that's just a fact. That's just the case. And that is not something that only exists in America, but in other countries. It exists in Mexico, it exists in Sweden and Norway and Germany and all over parts of Europe. Now, again, none of this means we have to hate anybody. None of this means we need to profile anybody. It's just more of awareness. This is just how stats go. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the, unfortunateness of racial misclassification. We've seen a spike in this really for the last 30 years. I mean, phenomenally, astronomically increased. We see articles about it every day. I have friends that report on this and post things about this every day. We see groups, especially even during these ICE arrests, we have groups of Hispanic Americans who are being classified as white when they get arrested. Now, some might argue, oh, well, it's hard to classify, Hispanics or even blah, 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 blah. That's all, to me, that's all gibberish, and it doesn't matter because we've seen classifications done the right way. But I mean, we're literally seeing like this is a black dude. Like, this is an African American, very clear African American, very clear. This is very clear to us that this is a Hispanic. This is a Mexican American, very clearly. Clear as day. I mean, you can find photos of this. I have photos here. And they're classified as white. And it's done all over the prison system and the arrest system. So, anyway, so this is an investigation back in 2019. Investigation found that deputies were routinely classifying drivers who were being arrested with common Hispanic surnames like Lopez, Rodriguez, and Martinez as white on traffic tickets over a nearly 6-year span. Experts argued this obscured the targeting of Hispanic drivers. So you have a bunch of Hispanic drivers getting arrested, and I'm not saying there might be a difference between races on how well you're a driver, but I think it's hilarious that in order to skew the stats, you had officers classifying non-whites as whites when arrested, and then to better, there's a weird tangent, and this was even reported on from the New Orleans Public Radio, but there's even a weird tangent about how they were trying to do this in order to make the statistics just more equal, to create like some sort of equality, which is hilarious to me. Another thing too is ongoing research continues to highlight that Arab Americans, Indian Americans, Native Americans are most racially misclassified groups in health and mortality data. And by the way, this is from the Agency of Healthcare Research and Quality. They are most racially misclassified groups. They are the most racially misclassified groups in health and mortality data, typically being misclassified as white. This masks severe overdoses compared to white Americans. Again, these groups are way more prone to drug overdose culturally, socially, and marking them as white is then going to bump the drug overdose numbers for white Americans, which is hilarious. Makes you think, do white people ever even commit crimes? That was a joke, by the way. That's humor. Humor, it's a fun tool. It allows you to just make fun of the situation and make it lighthearted. Anyway. But yeah, so that's a little review of just the stats and everything that Nick Fuentes was talking about that Piers Morgan refused to believe, which, I mean, who would have thought? He's a closeted liberal who hates people who practice celibacy, and his entire base, a lot of Piers Morgan's base is kind of conservative and kind of Catholic and kind of Baptist, and for him to go on and talk to Nick that way is just say bye to your career, bud. Excuse me. And so, anyway, that was fun. Something I've been thinking about. This came up in conversation with one of my good friends, or more recently good friends, which I want her to come on the podcast. Will you please come on to the podcast? Maybe. I don't know. Let's schedule it. Let's make it happen. It'd be really fun. We might only talk about one thing for an hour, and that's fine. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Anyway, but COVID came up with a good friend of mine, and its origins were kind of being debated. There was a microbiology professor who was saying one thing, she was saying another. What we know, and this is so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the two theories on its origin. One has way more substantial evidence, and me personally, I don't like this first theory, the one that has the most evidence. I don't like it. I would like to think the second theory is more valid. The second theory supports my beliefs a little bit more, but I kind of have to downplay it, right? But I'm going to talk about these so you can understand kind of a bigger conspiracy here, bigger conspiracy about COVID. Other than the fact that vaccines, and this is as reported by Telegram or whatever it is, the teleporter, I don't know, as reported by the Telegraph, that's who it is. It's the UK-based news outlet. Telegraph reports, they've got a pretty substantial article on this, how COVID vaccines are causing heart issues. That's a different conversation for another day. I would like to talk about it. But back to the origins of COVID. And I'm going to explain both of these origins, and then I'm going to talk about why. So first is the zoonotic origin, okay? There's overwhelming evidence suggests a natural spillover event. That there was a bat reservoir in southeast southern China, where horseshoe bats basically were carrying a sequence of SARS-CoV-2. The reason they say that is there is a 96%. I'll back it up a little bit. SARS-CoV-2 gets transmitted, and it is directly identified. 96% correlation, or 96% identical to a bat virus called RATG13. And this sequence, or these tests, were done in Yunnan, China, or Yunnan. And so while the virus originated in bats, it likely passed through an intermediate animal host before infecting humans. This host would have harbored a viral strain that allowed the necessary mutations to occur for efficient human infection and transmission. Pangolins were initially considered a strong candidate because viruses found in them share a high degree of genetic similarity to SARS-CoV-2, particularly in the receptor binding domain of the spike protein, which is crucial for attaching to human cells. There was a spillover location, and this is kind of the seafood market idea, right? The earliest known cases were detected in Wuhan, China, with strong evidence linking initial human infections to the Hunan seafood wholesale market in late 2019, where live and wild animals were sold. This market provided the necessary environment for a close human-to-animal interface, facilitating the jump from the animal host to the first human cases. So that's theory one. After all that jargon, here's theory one. There's a virus that comes from bats. It transmitted from a bat to an animal to a human. And there's a lot of evidence to that, including the fact that they are 96% identical and so on and so forth. Now, the second theory, personally, I like this theory more. Unfortunately, there's not as much information on this one. And we're going to talk about how the U.S. government has handled these two theories. So the other theory that gained a lot of attention is the possibility of the virus originating from a laboratory accident, specifically from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which conducts extensive research on bat coronaviruses. Okay, so It's either it comes from a seafood market in Wuhan, it's a bat virus, or it comes from a bat in a lab that tests viruses on bats also in Wuhan. So it either came from a lab that plays with viruses or it came from a seafood market per chance. A little bit weird, a little strange. There's not as much evidence on the first one, but still pretty valid in my opinion. Sounds valid. The argument is that the proponents of this theory suggested that a virus being studied in the lab, either naturally collected strain or a lab-altered one, accidentally escaped. Would not be surprised. There's some idiots over in those labs in China. Through scientific assessment, though, most major scientific reviews have concluded that there is no direct evidence to support the lab leak theory. The genetic structure of SARS-CoV-2 does not show signs of being intentionally engineered or designed. The specific mutations found in the virus are consistent with natural evolutionary processes seen in coronaviruses adapting to new host species, and leading intelligence and scientific agencies have assessed both theories with no conclusive evidence firmly establishing a lab origin over a natural one. That's the big thing. Now, you could say, this is why I wanted to talk about this. You could say with the lab leak that the authorities are just hiding the fact that it was engineered and released on the population. Okay, great. That and you could say maybe the reason they're hiding that is because no one would trust the government anymore. Okay, two things. Nobody trusts the government anyway, already. We don't trust any of those guys. Every politician's living a double life. We don't trust any of those people anyway. Second thing, viruses have been released on people before. They do engineer viruses. The tick, Lyme's disease. Lyme's disease was designed and accidentally got out when they shut the program down. This has happened before. That's the thing. It's happened before. So the idea that this is like the first instance and there would be public outrage is kind of silly because you're denying all the times this has happened before. Think about AIDS. Think about HIV. That was a problem. The vaccines that were first initially given out were literally making people drop dead. Anthony Fauci was also part of that. Now, you would want to maybe connect the dots between Anthony Fauci and the money trail that goes to Wuhan and the lab there. It gets a little weird. But again, Anthony Fauci is like, a guy who, regardless of what happened, he needs to go to prison, right? So I think when you go with the first theory that it was coming from a seafood market, and we say that's true, it gives the government way more leeway on using it to control people. For one reason, I'll say what it is. If they were to design a virus and if it were to ever come out, okay, and they put everybody in their homes, which we know now is completely unhealthy. They masked everybody. We know now that didn't work. They vaccinated everybody. And we know now that didn't work. You put everybody, let's say they engineered it and all that happened. I think it would be far more treasonous. Now, it still was treason for them to do what they did. It would be far more treasonous, and I think far more, it would have caused a much bigger outrage. And I think COVID wouldn't have lasted as long. But because it seems evidently, if we want to follow the evidence, that it was designed, that it wasn't designed, that was not a Freudian slip, I promise, that it wasn't designed, and that it came from seafood market. I think if I am the guys at the virus making factory, and I'm also the guys at the we need to submit our people to us factory, I saw, okay, this is a great opportunity to control everybody. Okay? And so what we're going to do is it's a weak virus. It's not going to kill everybody. Okay? Like we know now COVID's not a grandma killer. Okay? People who have comorbidities are the ones who are having the issues. Okay, there were some healthy people who got, whipped in the butt. Here's why I think that happened. Because you are all told to go inside. You were getting no vitamin D. You were inhaling an excess of carbon monoxide because of the mask. The masks were dirty. Because of the sterileness of everything, there was less germ exposure, which then just weakens your immune system. And so I think what I'm basically saying is that the government still was trying to submit everybody to them, and they were using COVID, which happened to leak naturally, or not leak naturally, but naturally come from something. They were like, okay, this is a great opportunity. The story of the virus is that it came from, a seafood market. Legitimately, like kind of right off the bat, we knew this. If we run the lab leak story, right, it'll make the MAGA people, or whoever you want to say, it'll make them look stupid. It'll make people be like, oh, you guys aren't men of science. Again, though, so what we're going to do is we're going to tout trust the science, okay? It's going to enrage a lot of people. We're going to say trust the science. We're going to put you all inside, because then it's going to make the effects of the virus way worse, and it's going to make you believe us, and then we're going to submit you all. That's what happened. That's what I think would happen. And then on top of that, we're going to give you a bunch of shots that a little bit down the road are going to really hurt you, and boosters are going to be killing adolescents and giving them heart disease. That's what happened. 100% that's what happened. It was a power grab. They used things like trust the science, which we know is BS, because it's like, we know the trust the science thing is BS because we know COVID was a weak virus and it only hurt people who were staying inside and they got comorbidities. They're staying inside. They're eating freaking Doritos and Pepsi every day. They're not outside. They're getting no vitamin D. Dr. Brett Weinstein, he's saying, first thing we said when COVID happened, don't stay inside. Go outside, get some fresh air. Don't wear a mask. The mask is useless. It doesn't do anything. Social distancing doesn't do anything. None of this works, okay? Those were their recommendations. Those actually worked. The people that did those things are healthy. The people that took ivermectin, the people that did saunas, ice baths, the natural remedies we have at our fingertips, people who did that, they survived COVID very fine. My parents, they took ivermectin. They were great. They were fine. I was fine. I got hit with COVID maybe once, but I was a healthy, active, fit individual raised by healthy, fit, active parents, told me to go outside, get sun. I did the brat diet and called it a day. It was like maybe 3 days, 4 days. You hear that from a lot of people. I think the lab story now, though, here's where it gets interesting, is now the White House is literally pushing the labs leak story on their website. And there's people who genuinely are starting to believe it, and I'm confused, other than the fact that they just want people to disagree with each other. It really, I can't, why push the lab leak story? Unless maybe it is really true, and the probability might have been lower than the seafood market, but it really is true. But again, why that story is just kind of silly, because we know they engineer viruses. We know they push them on people. We know this is not unheard of. This has been going on. I mean, Fauci was around during the AIDS crisis, and he was saying and touting the same stuff. RFK Jr. and freaking Anthony Fauci, their voices are whack because of vaccine accidents. Anyway, so it doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me why they're pushing the lab story now. I think it's just silly. I think this was one of those things where I think Trump was like, I'm just going to try to please my voter base because they just don't like me right now. Honestly, real. I would have done the same. I would have been like, you know what? Yeah, I did send $1 trillion to Israel, but you know what? COVID came from a lab, and everybody's just like, never mind. I forgive you. Send all my money to Israel. I forgive you. You're amazing. Thank you so much. It's just exhausting. It's exhausting. This game of back and forth is so exhausting. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I wanted to talk about something fun that I found interesting. I like old tech. I like analog stuff. I have a record player. I've collected vinyls for 6 years now. I like that stuff. There's kind of a movement that started the last maybe month or two, called the old technology movement. Seems pretty cool. It's basically just people wanting to move back to old stuff or start using wired headphones, playing CDs, journaling, writing books and stuff, because we're going to slowly forget how to do those things. And we're going to slowly rely on, these language models to do a lot of the hard work for us. Not only that, but this old stuff is pretty cheap. It's cheap. It's efficient. It's inexpensive versus the things that we have nowadays that are inefficient and expensive. So they're starting this new thing on January 1st. And it's just really just people wanting to migrate away from new stuff. And so I kind of wrote some things on this. But legacy systems lead to decreased productivity due to slow interfaces, manual data rekeying between disconnected systems, and the increasing difficulty and expense of finding support staff for aging algorithms. That's why people want to use it. People want to use it because it's old. It's slower to use. It keeps you in the moment. Businesses that cling to old technology risk losing customers and competitors who offer faster, more seamless service and online access using modern integrated cloud, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I just kind of rambled on my writing. But I think there's it's not a formal event, but there's a strong cultural counter trend, I think, when we look at this. It's kind of fun. It's driven largely by Gen Z and millennials. And I think it's just a search for authenticity and nostalgia in response to this weird ambient, opaque, beige, white, plasticky, chaos of the new world that we got. Everything is, Apple brought back liquid glass, and Apple simplified their apps back in 2012 or whenever that happened, and everything's just gotten beige and boring, and logos have been simplified. You've got, the minimalist look to everything. And minimalism is good when it's the elimination of things, not the sucking the life out of things. That's not minimalism. I don't even know what you call that. But yeah. It's more of a thing for people to just use tech more intentionally rather than more passively and just like, oh, I'm just, it's just part of my life, It's like popping a CD into your car is pretty sick, Playing a cassette tape and putting wired headphones in, or putting a record on a record player. Now, people have been doing that forever. That never went away. The physical media, too, like bringing DVDs back, that's freaking awesome, especially now that everything is going to be owned by Netflix. Can we talk about how, 500 media companies is, what 100% of the market represented? And then now, the entire media, landscape is now owned by 5 companies since, 1995. What the hell happened? Why'd we let that happen? Speaking, is that not Orwellian? Speaking of Orwell, Animal Farm, starring Seth Rogen and a bunch of other weird people. Trailer came out for this. It's kind of funny. It's exactly what you expect. Seth Rogen's a self-proclaimed freaking communist, socialist, liberal dirtbag. And though I will laugh at everything he does, because he's a funny, genuinely funny, hilarious, intelligent guy, but he's got no idea what he's talking about when he brings up the differences between socialism and capitalism. So we got this trailer for Animal Farm that comes out. I actually have read, unlike maybe 90% of the Earth's population, I have actually read Animal Farm, and I know what the story stands for. The story isn't necessarily socialism bad, though that is, and communism bad, though that is the main theme, and it is true. The core value is that evil and corruption oftentimes sneak up from within, and we overlook that a lot. And it's why we should look out for that in America. Well, this trailer is basically just like, oh, well, the evil, first off, it's just touting the stupid frickin' socialist, low IQ, retard statement, capitalism bad. You're doing it again. You're doing it again. You're capitalism bad. Oh, how intelligent and amazing of you to say that. And then, obviously, when I say this, I'll have somebody DM me like, what, are you against cheap housing and free buses? Oh no, you're scared of free buses. And yeah, exactly. I'm scared of free buses and cheap housing. Are you retarded? Are you retarded? Are you an idiot? Are you that dense? Am I talking to a wall? Are you that dense? If that's what you think socialism and communism will bring in and usher in, and that's the positives, you have no idea what you're talking about. Actually read some communist literature. Don't just put the Communist Manifesto in your frickin' Instagram bio. Actually read it and then come back to me. Then read some Thomas Sowell and tell me what you think. Read frickin' Economics for Dummies and tell me what you think. Anyway, they parrot the frickin' stupid point of capitalism bad. And they say that the threat and the evil actually comes from the outside. They're reframing the story to take away the actual values that were perpetrated by Orwell when he wrote it. It's very Orwellian of them to reframe the story around their own narrative. Huh. Isn't that funny? It's just stupid. Anyway, just wanted to hit on that since we were on topic. But this is a study I found today, and I wanted to talk about it because it really piqued my interest, and there's a lot of, I don't know. I think it's very on topic for today, and how often men get hated on. Excuse me. So what I wanted to talk about is the Youth Endowment Foundation over in the UK. They did a great study on something, and I think it's on topic because the UK is introducing a curriculum to basically make boys respect girls. First off, I think that's phenomenal for what will eventually become a majority Muslim country. I think it's hilarious that they think that introducing a curriculum like that will somehow alter the religious extremist beliefs and views of 40% of their population. And so what I wanted to say is so the Youth Endowment Foundation did a report called "How Do Boys and Girls Experience Violence?" And so here are the findings. So violence, victimization, and perpetration. Okay, so boys, according to their data that they pulled, and this is the third report in this series, boys are more frequently victims of most forms of violence, including robbery, physical assault, and incidents including weapons. Okay. Perpetration. The gap widens over perpetration. 21% of boys admit to violent behavior, nearly doubling 11% of girls. And then this is where things get weird, okay? When it regards to sexual violence, this is the kind of exception here, right? Where it's not one does more than the other. 6% of boys ages 13 to 17 report experiencing sexual violence in the past year, while only 7% of girls, only a 1% difference, it's probably less than that, of girls report experiencing sexual violence in the past year. Now, the one I wanted to talk about was relationship violence, online violence, and school violence. Since we're talking about respect for girls, I think it's important that we also teach the girls respect for the guys, something that hasn't been done, needs to be done. And I think a lot of men really resonate with this. And I'm tired of kind of pretending it's not an issue and that men are not exploited by women, especially younger men and younger women. I don't like that we just kind of pretend that only men can do that, and only men can emotionally manipulate women, when in fact, statistically, it turns out it's the exact opposite. And men feel very overwhelmingly oppressed by women when it comes to relationships. And I'm tired of pretending that is not the case. And I think it needs to be talked about. And I think I think our fathers need to step up and teach, and including the mothers as well, teach the girls about respect for each other. I think it should be a two-way road. I think it should be equal. I don't think it should be some weird case-by-case basis. And so, among teenage children surveyed who had been in a romantic relationship over the past year, and this is 27% of the group they got, nearly 49% experienced violent or controlling behaviors from their partner. 49% of that large group they collected up. Now, younger teens aged 13 to 15 in relationships are significantly more likely to report violent or controlling experiences. And then 58%, 58% of the people ages 13 to 15 are going to report violent or controlling experiences. And then 16 to 17-year-olds only report 42% of that. So it seems like they begin to grow up a little bit, maybe stand up for themselves more. But here's the surprise. Boys in relationships were more likely to report experiencing violent or controlling behaviors. And this is 57% of these boys report violent or controlling behaviors, whereas only 41% of girls report that. 27% of all 13 to 17-year-olds say they have seen images or threats of sexual assault online. 33% have encountered content that encourages violence specifically against women and girls. Well, that's great. We need to fix the online landscape. 76% of students report receiving some form of education on dating and relationships in the past year. The most commonly taught topics, such as consent and harassment, have an uneven reach. 55% received lessons on sexual consent, 43% received lessons on harassment, and 40% received lessons on how to be in healthy and respectful relationships. Children who admit to perpetrating sexual violence are significantly less likely to report receiving lessons on consent and harassment than the average child. Wow! So if you don't teach your kids how to respect people, they won't. Who would have thought? Isn't that funny? They naturally are inclined to do evil? Who would have thought of that? That's really weird. That's really weird. So to kind of conclude that, the report kind of concludes on the fact that boys face higher levels of general violence and perpetration, highlighting the need to address violence in public spaces and aggressive behavior among males. Girls face comparable rates of sexual violence, and both genders are heavily exposed to sexual, violent, and misogynistic content online. That's weird. Indicating a need for better digital safeguarding and education. Again, I don't think any kid under the age of 18 should be online. Kiss my butt. Relationship violence is widespread among sexually active teenagers, and boys are unexpectedly reporting higher rates of victimization in these relationships, suggesting that support and intervention should be designed to address the needs of all young people, regardless of gender. Who would have thought? Current school-based education on healthy relationships is not consistently reaching those who need it most, particularly students who have perpetrated violence. This points to a passing need for more universal, targeted, and thorough relationship and consent education to effectively safeguard young people. So it basically says, like, you're not going to if you don't teach your boys or your girls how to respect people, they won't. It's not the fact that, like, oh, the people that commit violence, they just need more help. It's no, they need help prior to that. Anyway, I've been yapping for a while here. Sorry about that. So, to wrap things up, we talked about the UK introducing a curriculum to boys to respect girls more. And data supports that the same thing needs to be done to girls about respecting guys more. There's an Animal Farm remake coming out that looks like hot garbage. Who would have thought? We talked about the old technology movement. What else we talk about? Oh, yeah, the SARS-CoV-2 leak, whether it was a lab or whether it was the government or whether it was a seafood market. It could have been both. It could be the lab leak. I wouldn't be surprised at all. In fact, I'd like it to be that case, but there's not enough evidence for that yet. And then we talked about Piers Morgan versus Nick Fuentes. That was a lot of fun. That was good, talking about per capita. Listen, I'm not a racist. I'm a statistic. I'm not racist. I'm statistically racist. That's all I got. Hopefully you understood that some of that was satire. I'm going to go make dinner now. I initially was going to live stream this, but Google locked me out of my account. So that was a lot of fun. Anyway, we've got a lot more episodes coming out in the next couple of weeks. I'm recording today, tomorrow, possibly Monday, possibly Tuesday. And then I'll be on a little bit of a hiatus towards the latter half of the week. Probably won't record from Wednesday till maybe Sunday afternoon. That's all I got for you. This has been People Watching, and I'm going to go eat dinner now. Yeah, thanks for listening. Maybe you shouldn't be listening. Maybe you need to be doing something more important. I don't know. I'm trying to be sarcastic, and it's not working. That's all I got. Good night.